Picture this. It's the year 1241. Europe is on the brink of total collapse. Tens of thousands of Mongol horsemen are thundering across the Hungarian plains, unstoppable, merciless. They've already crushed every army that dared stand in their way. Kiev has fallen. Hungary is drowning in blood. And now they're heading straight for Vienna, the gateway to Western Europe. The entire continent is holding its breath. Kings are panicking. Priests are praying. Because everyone knows if the Mongols want to take Europe, nothing can stop them. And then, something impossible happens. They stop, they turn around, and they ride back east. Just like that, the greatest military force the world had ever seen simply walked away. For nearly 800 years, historians have been scratching their heads over this question. Why? Why would an empire on the verge of conquering the world suddenly give up? Was it politics? Was it a military defeat? Or was there something else, something nobody saw coming? Today we're going to solve one of history's greatest mysteries. And the answer? It's not what you think. To understand what happened in 1241, we need to go back a few decades. The year is 1206. A man who was once an orphan boy named Temujin has just united the Mongol tribes under one banner. He takes a new name, Genghis Khan. Now, Genghis Khan wasn't just another conqueror. This man was different. He built an empire of 11 million square miles, twice the size of any empire before or since. To put that in perspective, that's about the size of the entire African continent. The Mongols had a saying, "Where Mongol horses tread, no grass grows again." And they meant it literally. Cities that resisted were wiped off the map. Populations that fought back were annihilated. This wasn't just conquest. This was total warfare on a scale the world had never seen. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, he left behind an incredible legacy for his son, Ögedei Khan. The empire stretched from northeast China to the Caspian Sea, the border between Europe and Asia. But Ögedei wasn't satisfied. Like his father, he had bigger plans. He continued the expansion in two directions, further into China in the east and deeper into Europe in the west. And here's what's remarkable. His armies actually crossed the Gobi Desert, one of the harshest environments on Earth, with tens of thousands of troops. Think about that logistics nightmare for a moment. By 1240, the Mongols had conquered Kiev, in what's now Ukraine. And they weren't slowing down. They kept pushing west. Now let me tell you what made the Mongols so terrifying to medieval Europeans. First, their cavalry tactics. European knights had never seen anything like it. The Mongols could shoot arrows accurately while riding at full gallop. They could fake retreats, then turn around and encircle their enemies. They moved faster than any army in history. But they also had something else, something that gave Europeans nightmares: gunpowder. Chinese gunpowder weapons. Imagine you're a medieval European soldier. You've trained your whole life with swords and lances, and suddenly you're facing explosions, fire and smoke. It was psychological warfare as much as physical. In March 1241, the Mongols invaded Hungary with overwhelming force. King Bela IV fled from his palace in Pest. That's part of modern-day Budapest. What followed was one of the bloodiest massacres in human history. 1 million people died, not just soldiers, priests, nobles, knights, farmers, everyone. And here's the thing. The Mongols weren't even trying that hard. They were winning easily. By the end of 1241, they were positioned perfectly to strike at Vienna. From Vienna, the rest of Western Europe would be defenseless. France, Germany, Italy, all within reach. Europe had no unified defense, no standing armies large enough to challenge them. It was over. Except, it wasn't. In December 1241, something unexpected happened. Ögedei Khan died back in Mongolia. Now for years, historians assumed this was the reason the Mongols retreated. The theory goes like this. Batu Khan, Ögedei's nephew, who was leading the Western campaign, had to rush back to the capital, Karakorum, to participate in choosing the next great Khan. Makes sense, right? Leadership crisis, political succession. Of course, they'd go back. There's just one problem with that theory. Batu Khan never went back to Karakorum. Historical records show he stayed in Russia, consolidating power with what became known as the Golden Horde. Meanwhile, Ögedei's widow took over as regent back home. So if it wasn't politics, what was it? Some historians suggested military factors. Maybe European resistance was stronger than we thought? Maybe the Mongols were overextended, but the evidence doesn't support that either. They were winning every battle, they had momentum, they had supplies, they had no reason to stop. So what really happened? Here's where the story gets fascinating. A few years ago, a team of scientists published research in science reports that completely changed our understanding of this historical mystery. And their answer came from an unexpected place: tree rings. Yes, tree rings. See, trees are like nature's journal. Every year they add a new ring to their trunk, and the thickness of that ring tells us about the climate that year. Wet years, thick rings; dry years, thin rings. These scientists collected tree samples from 5 different regions across Europe and Asia, areas where the Mongols were operating during their invasion. And what they found was remarkable. Let me explain why climate matters so much to this story. The Mongol army's greatest strength was its cavalry. These weren't just soldiers on horses. These were warriors who lived on horseback. They could ride for days without rest. They could cover 60 miles in a single day. For comparison, medieval European armies moved maybe 15 miles per day. The Mongols were basically the Ferrari of medieval warfare. Speed, mobility, flexibility. That was their superpower. But here's the catch. All that mobility required one critical thing: grasslands. Open, dry steppes where horses could gallop freely and graze constantly. The Mongol strategy depended on this. They didn't carry weeks of supplies like European armies. Instead, they lived off the land. Their horses ate grass. They hunted game. They moved fast and traveled light. Now let's talk about what the tree rings revealed. From 1238 to 1242, exactly the years of the European invasion, the climate in Hungary and the surrounding regions went through an unusual cycle. Temperatures dropped. Precipitation increased dramatically. The spring of 1241 was particularly wet. The snow that had accumulated over winter melted early. Heavy rains fell continuously. And the result? The Hungarian grasslands turned into swamps. Let that sink in for a moment. The very terrain the Mongols needed, dry, open plains, had become a muddy, waterlogged mess. Imagine trying to maneuver thousands of cavalry through knee-deep mud. Suddenly, their greatest advantage, speed and mobility, completely disappeared. But it gets worse. The flooding didn't just make travel difficult, it destroyed the spring harvest. Crops failed. Grasslands that should have been feeding Mongol horses were underwater. By 1242, the year the Mongol campaign ended, the wetlands were at their peak. The scientists found this was the wettest period in that region in decades. So here's the situation Batu Khan faced. His horses were starving because there was no grass to graze on. His army couldn't move quickly because the ground was too soft. Food supplies were running low because the local agriculture had collapsed. And winter was coming. He had 2 choices: push forward into unknown territory with a weakening army, or retreat south to drier regions where his cavalry could function properly. For a commander like Batu Khan, who was by all accounts a brilliant strategist, this wasn't really a choice at all. Think about it from his perspective. Sure, he could probably still take Vienna. But then what? His supply lines would be stretched thousands of miles. His horses would continue to weaken. And if European forces managed to regroup, his army might find itself trapped in hostile territory during winter. That's not courage. That's suicide. So he made the tactical decision: retreat south through Serbia, then back to Russia, where the climate was more favorable and his cavalry could operate effectively. This wasn't a surrender. This was survival. Let's think about the enormous historical implications of what happened. If the climate had been normal in 1241, 1242, Europe as we know it might not exist. The Mongols could have swept through Germany, France, and Italy. The Renaissance might never have happened, at least not the way it did. The age of exploration, the Enlightenment, modern Western civilization, all of it could have developed completely differently, all because of rain and mud. Now, the death of Ögedei Khan did play a role, but not the way historians originally thought. His death didn't cause the retreat, but it did prevent the Mongols from ever coming back. After Ögedei died, the empire fractured. His sons and grandsons fought each other for power. The unified command that had made the Mongol conquest possible broke apart. Sure, Mongol successor states continued to rule over huge territories. The Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Yuan dynasty in China. But they never again launched a coordinated invasion of Western Europe. The moment had passed. Interestingly, Genghis Khan's legacy lives on in Mongolia today. His face is on their currency. There's Genghis Khan vodka, Genghis Khan cigars, and even Genghis Khan International Airport in Ulaanbaatar. He went from history's most feared conqueror to a national brand. But here's what's really fascinating to me. Modern climate science has now given us the tools to understand how much nature shapes history. The same research techniques that revealed the Mongol withdrawal have shown us other climate-driven historical events. The Polynesian migrations across the Pacific were enabled by favorable winds. The collapse of ancient Mayan cities was triggered by drought. Even Attila the Hun's invasions of Rome, 800 years before Genghis Khan, were facilitated by climate conditions that pushed nomadic tribes westward. History isn't just about great men making great decisions. It's about humans adapting, or failing to adapt, to forces beyond their control. So what can we learn from this 800-year-old story? First, there's a profound lesson about power and its limits. The Mongol Empire was the most powerful military force in human history. They had conquered more territory than anyone before or since. They had the best technology, the best tactics, the best warriors, and they were stopped by weather, not by brave knights, not by clever generals, not by superior fortifications, by rain, by mud, by grass that didn't grow. It's humbling, isn't it? We like to think human willpower and ambition can overcome anything. We celebrate individuals who refuse to give up and never surrender. And there's value in that determination, absolutely. But sometimes the wise move is recognizing when external factors you can't control, make success impossible. Batu Khan understood this. He could have pushed forward out of pride, lost his army, and accomplished nothing. Instead, he adapted to reality. There's wisdom in knowing when to retreat. Second, this story has urgent relevance for us today. We're living through our own period of rapid climate change. It's not just about polar bears and melting ice caps, though those matter. It's about how climate affects human societies. Droughts drive migration, floods destroy agriculture, changing weather patterns disrupt economies. Just like in 1242, nature doesn't care about our plans and ambitions. The Mongols learned this the hard way. Their entire military strategy was built around a specific climate assumption: dry grasslands. When that assumption failed, their empire's expansion failed. What assumptions is our civilization built on? Stable rainfall patterns for agriculture, predictable seasons, moderate temperatures. And what happens when those assumptions stop being true? Finally, there's a lesson about humility. The mightiest empire in the world was humbled by something as simple as wet ground. It's a reminder that no matter how powerful we become, no matter how much technology we develop, we're still subject to forces larger than ourselves. That doesn't mean we're helpless. The Mongols didn't just give up and die. They adapted. They changed their strategy. They survived, but they had to accept reality first. So to answer our original question, why did the Mongol Empire abandon its invasion of Europe? Not because they were defeated in battle, not because their leader died, not because they lost their courage. They stopped because nature changed the rules of the game. The climate that had enabled their conquests, dry grasslands perfect for cavalry warfare, suddenly became their enemy. And unlike human enemies, you can't defeat rain with arrows and strategy. History remembers Genghis Khan and his descendants as unstoppable conquerors, and in many ways they were. But this story reminds us that there's always something that can't be conquered. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to step back. Sometimes survival requires accepting that not every goal can be achieved. Sometimes the smartest warriors are the ones who recognize when they're fighting an unwinnable battle. As we face our own climate challenges today, maybe we should remember the Mongols in Hungary. Maybe we should remember that nature isn't something to be conquered. It's something to be respected, understood, and adapted to. Because in the end, history shows us this: you can conquer cities, you can conquer nations, you can even conquer empires. but you can't conquer the rain. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about how the past shaped our world. And let me know in the comments, do you think Batu Khan made the right decision? Or should he have pushed forward to Vienna regardless of the cost? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.